This video is entitled Selected List Methods and Functions and goes along with Chapter 4 of the book An Introduction to STEM Programming with Python 3. I'm Dr. Renaud from Shawnee State University, and I'll be taking you through this video presentation. In this presentation, I'm going to discuss two very common functions that we use when dealing with lists and tuples. And the first one is called sum, and the second is called len. Then I'm going to discuss several methods that we can do, several actions and things that we can do with lists: append, pop, insert, remove, reverse, and sort. The len function, if you say len, open parenthesis, pass it a list or pass it a tuple or a dictionary, we'll talk about those later, but it will return the count of the items. So if there are 0 items in the list or tuple, it'll return a 0. If there's 1,000 items, it would return 1,000. So it's going to return the number of items in the list or tuple. Sum is also a really handy function if the list or tuple contains numbers only. Now, if it contains numbers and strings, then it's not going to work, or if it contains strings, it's not going to work. But if the list contains only numbers, or the tuple contains only numbers, sum will return the total of all of those numbers added together. So we don't have to do anything fancy to get the total of a list. We just say sum, open parenthesis, list, close parenthesis, and voila, it will return back to us a number. We can see here in this little Python program that we have a list called L that contains a bunch of numbers. On line 3, I print the list of L to be 9 because there are 9 items in the list. On line 5, I print the total of the list would be 183. If we add all those numbers up, it would equal 183. And then on line 7, I calculate the average or the mean of the numbers in that list. Because if you remember, the average of a list would be add them all up, divide by the number of elements. That would be sum divided by len, wouldn't it? So we sum divide by len, and I print out the mean value or the average value of the list at 20.33. Now, the following things we're going to talk about are methods of lists. And remember that a method, you follow the list variable by a dot and then the name of the method followed by parentheses and maybe an argument in there. The list methods will modify the list, will change the list in memory, or potentially could return a value to you. So the first list method I want you to know is the append method. If we have a variable x that contains a list, I could say list variable dot append, and in the parentheses put in a value, and it will add that value to the end of the list, modifying the variable x. You don't have to set x equal to that. It just will do it by saying x dot append. The other method that I want to cover in this slide at least is the pop method. The pop method returns to you the last value on the list and removes it from the list. So if the variable y contained the list 1, 2, 3, y.pop parentheses is going to return the value 3 and change the list y to contain 1 and 2. Let's see an example of these two methods. So on line 1, I create a list called V that has nothing in it. I created an empty list using a set of square brackets. On line 3, I appended the number 10 to the list. On line 4, I appended the word wahoo to the list. And then on line 5, I printed the list, and you can see up above it printed the list. On line 8, I do an input, so the computer asks me for my name, and then on line 9, I append the name, and then on line 10, I print it, and you can see above, enter your name. I typed in Jimbo. It added Jimbo to the end of the list, and we're great. Now, on line 13, take a look. I have the variable called name equal v.pop, parentheses. It won't work if the parentheses aren't there because that would access the property pop, not the method pop, but we just put the parentheses there. And so now the variable name contains the last value from the list. Well, the last value on the list is my name, Jimbo, and it removed it from the list. So down below, I print name, comma, V. So I would print the name that it pulled, popped from the list, and it would also then print the list as it exists. And you can see that the list now contains 2 items and it printed my name. The next 2 list methods are the insert method and the remove method. So again, starting with a variable that contains a list, I can say dot insert. Now, when I insert into a list, I've got to give it 2 values. The first value is the position in the list to insert that value, and the second argument would be the actual value to insert. Position 0 would be the first element in the list. Remember, they're 0 based. Then also the remove method. Now, the remove method is kind of neat because it doesn't remove by index, it removes by value. So what remove is going to do, if I say like list variable dot remove and pass a value, it's going to find the first occurrence of that value. It's going to start at the beginning of the list and go do, 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 and it's going to find the first occurrence of that value and it'll remove it from the list and modify the list in memory. Let's see an example of these 2 methods. So on line 1 of this little Python program over here, I have a list of cities: Atlanta, Louisville, Topeka, Walla Walla. I just like saying Walla Walla, a little town in Washington state, by the way. And you can see on line 3, I print the list of cities. On line 6, I insert Cincinnati into the list at position 1. So I'm saying cities.insert 1 Cincinnati, and if you see above, Cincinnati is now at the 1 position, and everything else got scooted. Louisville and Topeka and Walla Walla got scooted on over in the list. Cool. Take a look at line 10 then. In line 10, I say cities.remove Topeka, and it went through the list and went, there's Topeka, and deleted it and removed it. Now, if Topeka had existed multiple times, it would have only removed the first occurrence of Topeka, but you can see that it removed Topeka from the list. The last 2 handy string methods or list methods that I wanted to talk about are the sort and reverse methods. Now, there are lots of list methods, and if you want to do other things with the list besides what I've described here, that you think, that ought to be built in, there ought to be an easy way to do that, go to the documentation, and I'll bet you that there's a list method already built to do just about anything you could want to do to a list, but I couldn't cover them all. So these 2 are sort and reverse, and sort does exactly what you think it would do. It's going to take a list and it's going to sort it into either numerical order or alphabetical order, depending on what's in the list. If there's a string anywhere in the list, it'll be in alphabetical order. If it's all numeric, it'll be in numerical order. And then the reverse method will take a list and switch it around. Play switcheroo, the last becomes first, first becomes last. It reverses the list. So let's take a look at some examples of sorting and reversing lists. This concludes our little video on handy list functions and some of the methods of a list. This presentation is copyright 2020 by James M. Renault, PhD. You can contact me at jrenault@shawnee.edu if you have any questions or issues with this video. This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License, and I'd like to say thank you for watching this video presentation.